The Front Row Back Row podcast is a show where two grad school buddies discuss physical therapy entrepreneurship. I helped guide a company to an 8-figure exit, and I'm now starting my own mobile company. Brian grew his mobile practice to 4 clinics, and he's now doing $1 million in revenue. Join us as we help you grow your own business. Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. And with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf. And together we are PhysioGrowth. PhysioGrowth is a mentorship group where we help clinicians and business owners really help build and coach them towards business success. Cool little early plug here. We have one of our members. She's hired 2 people in the last 3 months. So if that's a problem for you, give us a call. So today we're going to be talking about business plateaus in business. So if you are just starting to listen to this podcast, my history is I had a lot of success working for somebody else as a corporate PT, but now I'm starting my own practice out of the back of my car. Mobile PT, cash pay, the works, right? What you see on Facebook, everyone's doing, right? Now, Brian did that about 9 years ago, and now he has 5 clinics and is doing $2 million in revenue. So he's walked this walk, and he's gone through some of these business plateaus that I'm hitting now. So we love to have this conversation be a very kind of tactical conversation for a PT, maybe listening in their car to the next patient or, having it on while they're doing notes at the end of a day. And I think, Brian, I want to talk to you about kind of the business plateaus that I feel I should know about in my corporate training, right? But I feel like I might be hitting, and then kind of some things in your experience, what you've done and how you've kind of known you've hit the plateaus. Because I think that's the problem. People know that there are bottlenecks and plateaus, and eventually I'm going to get too busy. I'm going to get all this stuff. It's just, we kind of want to help people to see it before it happens.
Yep, for sure. And I think the first thing is to understand, especially if there's a lot of people who are in the physical thing that they're talking about here, the way I would describe it is no different than if you hit a fitness plateau, right? You would change things up, right? Or you would figure out, all right, what is screwing up my product, right? And then make a change. So a lot of times when I think of plateaus, the difference in plateaus just means what I'm currently doing has maxed out its potential. So if that's all, okay, cool. Well, then I just got to find out what's maximizing this, what's keeping it at a plateau, and how can I elevate that? And it can be done in several different ways. So, give me kind of your example of what you were talking about. I'm going to use some numbers to bring it up and change them, but I'm also going to give a couple tactical things that people can do really quickly.
Oh, dude, any of my friends who call me and ask me, I will tell them my numbers flat out right away. So don't worry about covering
that's fine.
me up.
Cool.
The biggest thing is I'm at that plateau that I think a lot of mobile PTs get when you start cash pay, and then you're starting to get some traction with marketing, where my schedule is now my limitation. I don't have a lot of time to go market. I don't have a lot of time to make new word of mouth contacts. And I feel that the summer's coming in Arizona, so it's going to go down. I'm going to be okay. But in the fall, all that time spent marketing is now going to completely wash my schedule. And the last thing I want to do is get to November when all the snowbirds come back and I'm just struggling and basically treading water for 6 months, right?
Yep.
Trying to figure this stuff out. So I want to get a head start on that.
So I think the big thing with this is, to realize where the constraint lies. The constraint still lies in getting more clients.
Right now, yeah.
Because if you had this is a classic mistake that I think, and look, what ends up happening to a lot of people, especially when they look to hire their first person or hiring somebody, what ends up happening is they're I'm struggling in the sense of well, as I'm bringing on more people, right? As I'm bringing up, you have to get them busier. But in this scenario where Owen's at, you're not bringing anybody new. You're not expanding anything. You're not hiring a marketing agency. You can that. Well, I guess I could make an argument for that, right? You could do that. But the first constraint I would say is that he doesn't have enough patience. So that's why I would say in terms of that, that's where hiring a marketing agency, if they could help you in getting more patients, would be good, right? And that new referral source and flow. So that's a good first place. The second place is kind of where you're headed and where you're going. I mean, we talked a little bit about whether it's the mobile side or the brick and mortar and so on and so forth. But the reality is there's another jump coming at some point that obviously we're going to need to figure out at some point, right? So I know that's something you were talking about.
Well, so this is my thought, right? And just kind of poke holes in it as it goes. Next few months, marketing, right? I'm shaking hands, kissing babies, whatever, right? And we want to get it so that I'm running pretty hot as the snowbirds come in. And that's when I'll raise my prices. And I'm debating between the cut hard, cut fat, cut once thing, where I go from 175 now to maybe like 225, 250, so that I can get the same revenue if even like 30 or 40% of people drop off, right? So that way I buy myself that 30 or 40% of my week back. And then that I can then try to work to fill that all while making more money per patient. And the hope is I live below my means at home. I don't take as much money out of the business. And then I stack cash away to get a location, right?
Yep.
And longtime listeners of this show know that I'm a cash PT, but I'm not married to cash PT. Like I spend a lot of time in insurance, and most people should know by now that mobile and taking every insurance under the sun just doesn't work financially. So
Yep.
that's my 1 year perspectives.
So one of the things that I would say here, right, with Owen, and then I'm going to flip it around a little bit, is I think that the other way you do it, the way that
Oh,
can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I think you hit the mute button. We're leaving it in.
I
We're
didn't
leaving
touch
it
it,
in.
but leave it. No, I'll have to edit that out.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you're going to think about when
We
it
don't
comes
edit
to
this show.
one of the things that you're going to think about with this is I actually think that, in this scenario, because I know what Owen's plan is, I would actually suggest that he go towards the location earlier, because in my mind that you're kind of delaying the process a little bit with being a little more nervous, right? So the answer is, if you have some rock solid, like say I had people knocking down your door right now, right at 175, and you had like, oh my God, Brian, I'm seeing 30 patients a week. I have more people coming on my, like, knocking on my door. I got a waiting list. That's crazy to see me. You wouldn't feel nearly as worried about going into a location, right? You'd be fine. So
Yeah.
the difference is, it's really, again, coming back to what's the constraint of causing the plateau. The plateau is more patients. So if I can get more patients in the door to that point, then the plateau really does become the time. So again, the time in that essence will be then relieved through, through a location, because then a location, then if you lose some people to go to that location, you are going to lose some people. And I actually think that that's closer to your actual goal of your business than, say, like raising prices. Now, for those people who want to stick with the mobile practice, I would just raise the prices to 200, 225, right? Like I think it makes sense, right, to do that. And you can keep going up and up and up from there, depending on what you want to do. And for those people that are like, well, I want to stick in the cash-based world only, then I would suggest exactly what Owen just said. But if you're looking to pivot to insurance, because what's going to happen is the actual next pivot that he's going to have to make at some point is, all right, now I'm in a location, I'm charging X amount of money, I'm getting busier. Now I want to add insurance. And this is where I think a lot of cash PTs are like, Brian, you went to insurance? Because what ends up happening now is you, quote unquote, have to take a pay cut, right? Because your business does, because your business is now going to go into a situation with a lot of volume. And for those of you who are like, oh, I can go and network with Pete with certain insurance contracts and have another person do that. That's not how that works. So you're going to have to, the clinic goes in network with the actual, like, the clinic actually goes in network. And so then all the PTs there are now in network as well. So that's the next pain point that a lot of people are doing. So I think you want to get adjusted to all of that process at 175, because you and I both know that reimbursement rates are not going to be 175 per visit. So that's the other aspect of this. So there's a process of, like, how do you get to the next PT? How do you get to the next step? How do you do this next hurdles? And that's where it becomes a bit of a challenge, right?
And if you like this type of content, this tactical content, please tell your friends. We're trying to grow this thing. So, if you like hearing that, put in the comments what you want to hear about. We'll talk. We'll try and use that as ammo for our next show. So, what I'm getting from you then, if I could put kind of a big bow on this, from what I'm hearing, is that really, to make these decisions today, you have to have your goal in mind for the future, right? And maybe even like 1 or 2 years ahead. And that's what may help at least smooth over the plateaus. I don't think anybody's going to say, here's my 3 steps to making sure insurance is pain-free, and you get to bring home the same amount of money every month, you know?
Yeah.
And I also agree with you. There's a lot of that where, oh my God, you have a location and you're taking cash. Why do you want to change? And then you ask them to like start hiring, and then they say like, oh, now I see why, you might want to switch over to insurance. So these are the things where I think that for me as a business owner, trying to look forward and not just get bogged down in the business, I'm constantly kind of obsessing over, the shower thoughts or, stuff that you're thinking about while you're about to go to sleep. And
Yep.
I think that it's tough because you're never going to know why, right? You're never going to know the answer. But at the same time, like you talk to people like you and you're like, oh yeah, I did that and it was stupid.
Well, I think what you want to think about is like for instance, I don't think I ever raised my prices past 150, but then I got the location.
Yeah.
Right. And so by doing the location and getting adjusted to that, when we went to like a aspect where we're only making, and we had patients knocking down the door, and then all of a sudden we said, hey, we're taking it. And then here's the thing, guys, I would also be tactical in how you deploy taking on insurance. You're going to want to do it, insurance by insurance by insurance, just like that, very carefully.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, oh, I'm just going to take them all at one shot, like that's also not a good idea either.
Yeah.
So like these plateaus are different in that way, right? So like, depending on what your practice is and what you want to take, it's easier to enroll in certain ones than others. You want to look at certain reimbursement rates. You want to look at what the participation is, what the difference is between like cash rates and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, man, that's the next hurdle. So for me, I actually think that it depends on, we actually talked about this and turned this podcast more into a path discussion.
Mm-hmm.
What path do you want to go to? And I can give you pros and cons to every path. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think, well, when you talk about the plateau, like plateau towards what, right? If we're talking about a chart, like a stock chart, right? It's going up and we're talking about a plateau. Well, you're going towards something. You're going towards up and to the right,
Yep.
And if that's where you want to go as a business owner, you have to think, 2 or 3 steps ahead to make at least make that transition a little bit smoother. And I think you bring up a good thing here. And I mean, this might be another podcast, but like, you can only raise your rates so high.
Exactly.
Right? And eventually, if you want to do the solopreneur, where I'm God's gift to physical therapy, and I charge 3 something, right? Well, I mean, professional athletes, super rich, all of them, it's $500 an hour.
I got
right?
news for
Like,
you. Pro athletes do not pay $400 or $500 an hour.
I was going to say, like, pro athletes are closer to what the general public plays.
They like things for free, to give you guys all an idea. So, by the way, just for those of you who think, oh, pro athletes, no, they don't fucking pay.
So let's just talk. Then the uber rich are really the only ones who are going to be paying like your $400 or $500 a year or a session. So you're fighting for that market. And hey, you want to do that by all means, but it's a much harder market to do. To give yourself that pay raise, whereas scaling and building out something where you have to be the boss of other people is a way to give yourself. I mean, I'm looking at 30 more years of working, right? Like I want a pay raise every year.
Yeah, Well, we're talking about. And by the way, honestly, interesting point, and this is something I would say is I think entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily guarantee that. That's not the agreement that you have with entrepreneurship. That's potentially what your employees have.
Yep.
Right, your employees have an agreement with you that we'll get a little bit of a pay raise each year, right? But not necessarily us as as an entrepreneur, right? Now the difference is we could have monster years, but we could also have terrible years, right? So I could show you, stuff where it was bad, right? Because of just going through COVID and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the aspect of it is the difference in this is in entrepreneurship, you're kind of the last to get paid. So the answer is like, how do you keep making sure there's money in there, but also able to expand and and a lot of it is, all right, as we grow, what's the path? And to Owen's point, the number that seems to be that, we've talked to a lot of PTs and cash PT and been around it, and then been around the insurance. The number that I seem to see that's consistent, where you're like, all right, this is the number that like people are willing to pay, where it kind of grows decently, is around $200 a session. That seems to be for PT. Once you start getting up above that, what happens is it becomes just very difficult to scale to like have multiple employees or whatnot. So that's the number that I've just found in general. Again, I'm hoping that if you're charging way more than that, leave a comment below in this podcast and let us know what you're charging, and and tell me if you think I'm full of shit. I'd love to hear that too. By the way, I charge more than $200. It's not like I'm again, like that's not. Owen knows the cash rates that I'll charge. Like it's not one of those things where I'm biased to it, but that just seems to be for like the joke. And again, for you
But
peasants,
the reason they're doing that,
that's where you are, right?
but the reason they're doing that is because you can say, well, I either do that or I run my multi-million-dollar a year business.
Yeah,
And if
exactly.
they want you, they'll pay it. So
100%.
most people who are listening here they don't have that.
That's actually a really good point to go to what Owen's talking about. Is like that's kind of what I was getting at there. Is like to your point. Is like at a certain point, like when Owen's charging 175 a session, that's a really nice rate. So the reality is, if you the way that you actually punch to the next levels could actually be organically by creating more of a demand through creating more authority. Because now, when I say, "Hey, I run 5 clinics, I work in professional sports," there's not many people that do that. I'm all of a sudden in a different strategy. Great thing that I heard from a mentor. Love this. You can charge more if you have an offer that no one else can price shop against you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if me and Owen are next to each other in a room and I'm like, hey, I have 5 different clinics, like, yeah, I do stuff in professional sports. Yep, I do this stuff. And like then Owen says, hey, I'm a physical therapist. And I'm not picking on Owen. Owen knows I love him.
No, we all know I'm a better
Yes.
therapist. It's fine.
Yeah, whatever. All right. So anyway, so or say just take any 2 physical therapists. Why? Because in theory, they're very comparable. Think about being in like a supermarket. If I'm here and I'm looking at different toothpastes, I'm looking at different brands, and if I have specific reasons for why I want some, I'll do that, right? But the answer is really you want to think about that's why niching is so important, right? Because if it now to that point, say I'm like I have 5 different clinics, I'm working in Major League Soccer, and Owen's like, hey, I've worked with a ton of really good golfers. Well, all of a sudden, if I'm a golf guy, maybe I lean more towards Owen, right, in that capacity. Yeah. So that's the difference on what happens as you elevate yourself and as you elevate your brand. As your brand and all that grows with the business, it allows you to command more money. So that's essentially how that can work long term. So
all right, we'll leave it at that. We got a few podcasts to record today, man. So I think we came up with like 3 other topics.
I love it.
All right, so with that, we are out as always. If you like this, check us out. Links in the description. All right, Brian, have a good one.
Physio-growth.com. See ya.
There it is. Get it in there.